So I'm Jeff Cash. I am a corporate M&A attorney. I've been practicing exclusively in Dallas since 1997. Born and raised in Louisiana. I went to LSU undergrad. Woo! Go Tigers! Go Tigers! And then I went west for law school. Went to Pepperdine, just outside Los Angeles. Started at Thompson Knight, and I joined Bell Nunnally about 15 months ago. So I can tell you guys a lot about thinking about doing things and developing your business along the way. My partner, Elena, is in our labor and employment section. Elena?
Yeah, so hi, everyone. We're thrilled to be here with you today. I'm Elena Ackles. I'm a partner in our labor and employment and litigation sections. I've been practicing for a little over 10 years. I guess well over 10 years now, actually. I went to SMU for undergrad and SMU Law School. I'm a native Houstonian, but I'm a Dallasite now. I'm a convert, one of the few. And I'm thrilled to be here today and visit with you about, collaboration between in-house lawyers and outside counsel.
Yeah, great. So first thing, Elena is the seasoned, polished litigator who can stand and talk in front of juries and judges. And I'm the corporate guy that drafts stuff and sends emails that have sometimes very nasty things in the emails. That's the best I can do. So I'm going to talk about 2 or 3 minutes. And Elena's going to talk for 57 minutes of our presentation.
They should have never given me a microphone. That was probably a big mistake.
But the reason Heath convinced me to do this when he said you have to do it a while back, Heath's leads our marketing department and a partner at Bell Nunnally as well, is because I love the idea of collaboration. And I joined the Vanderbilt Political Institute of Legal Innovation a couple of years ago, 1919, right before the pandemic, and was starting my first of 5 classes about innovation and change in the legal industry. And it was fascinating and a little scary. And then the pandemic came and things got more scary. But I was really excited to talk about collaborating in different ways. First off, this whole process is going to be collaborative because I'm not a professional speaker. So if you don't raise your hands when we ask to raise your hands, we'll go like table by table and interview you guys and ask questions.
Law school style.
So
right?
First question is, raise your hand if you hate raising your hand, these kind of things. Okay, great. That's me. And I would be sitting in the very back where that lady is because I wouldn't want to be participating at all. That'd be me. Okay, second, is everybody, have you practiced law for more or less than 10 years? We'll go less than 10 years first. Okay, and then more than 10 years. Okay, so who has not practiced law more or less than 10 years? Because 2 of you didn't raise your hand. Heath didn't raise your hand. Okay, I didn't see it. Okay. The one thing that lawyers have done from the beginning in law firms is business development and working on careers. It's also really simple. Get a job, be a good associate, make partner. The path to developing our careers was just straight in front of us. And then somewhere along the way, a partner pulled us aside and said, hey, congratulations, you're a partner, go get business. And that's how we business develop. The reality in our world today is how we used to practice law isn't what people want anymore. You used to call us and say, here's our problem. We'll say, great, we're the lawyers from XYZ firm. We're here to save the day. Goodbye. Now we know that in-house teams want to work on their problems. They want to solve their problems. They want to be a part of the solution. And at the same time, you're trying to market and develop your department, whether it's a 1-person department or a 50-person department, to show value inside your company, to help you with your own careers because it benefits us. And anytime you can have an outside counsel help you help yourself, that's a win-win for everybody. Elena?
No, I totally agree. And I think, today we're going to talk about some things that that we've seen over the years, right? I mean, so Jeff and I sort of chuckle because we're like, okay, Jeff, you've been at a law firm your entire life. How are you going to tell these folks how to advance in-house?
Question number 1, how do we not patronize people where we've never worked one day in-house to tell you what we think would be a great idea for you to develop your careers? Hi, my name's Jeff.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's kind of where the collaboration comes in, right? Because so Jeff's been practicing for over 20 years. I've been practicing for over 10 years. And we've worked with a lot of in-house lawyers at companies of all sizes across industries. And so, this is more about sharing our perspective and just things that we've seen over the years that have worked for, some of our clients and a lot of our clients who are friends, and they come to us and they tell us what's going on and what's working and what's not. And so this is really about, sharing our perspective and collaborating with you to see if there can be a shared benefit there.
That's a great way to put it, because the reality is this is just our perspective. It's what we're learning. It's what we're being told by people like you that are our current clients or our friends. And it's also literally personal experiences, as I've watched friends grow up in the in-house world. So it's amazing how much that's changed when, as an M&A lawyer, I go deal to deal to deal, and it's hard to keep clients. But my friends go in-house and they're running companies now, and they've segued out of the legal department. They're in the C-suite and they're running the business themselves. So all we really want to do is give you a combined 34 years of law firm perspective, and maybe it's helpful, maybe it's not, but we definitely want it to be helpful, and that's our goal.
Yeah.
So we have a very short outline, because this is going to be kind of a collaborative discussion. And like I said before, we're going to make you raise your hand at a minimum at some point about some of these questions, because if there's a bad part of the outline, we'll just skip over it and go to the next part of the outline.
So Jeff, one of the topics that we wanted to talk about was, how to stay relevant and involved even once you bring in outside counsel. At that point, do you just step aside? Do you stay involved? And how do you stay involved? What have you seen as an effective tool that in-house lawyers have used to stay involved and stay relevant?
So the biggest thing on the M&A side is sometimes I deal with CFOs, sometimes I deal with GCs, and sometimes I deal with sort of a chief operation type officer. It's not always the law department. It's very rarely the entire law department. And what's changed in the last 2 years is I get hired now and they don't want off the deal. They want to know what's going on. They want to be not necessarily negotiating the purchase agreement, but they want to be in the loop, because they want to turn around and show value to to who they answer to, whether it is the GC or the CEO. They want to say, I helped get this deal done. That's part of my job. And even though we hired Bill Nunnally and they did the paperwork, my team helped get the deal done. They will not step away from the deals. And I can't remember the last time, the first 10 years of my career, where really anybody in-house was involved at all in a transaction. They just weren't involved. Here's the deal, tell us when it's done. That's been the biggest difference.
Yeah, and I think we see that too as being incredibly valuable in the litigation world, the labor and employment world, when we have in-house counsel that stays involved and really understands the business objectives. When we're making these decisions about how to handle a reduction in force, or when we're making key strategic decisions in litigation, it's the in-house folks that really understand the business objectives and can bring that to the table. We see that they really shine in-house. And that's also where your outside lawyers can be a real cheerleader for you. So for example, I tried a case in February that was a really, let's just say, messy pregnancy discrimination case. And the in-house lawyers were super involved in the case. They were hands-on when we were prepping witnesses. They were there for the arbitration, all 3 days of it. And I had the opportunity to present the founder and CEO of the company. And during his prep, and then when I called him to tell him that we won the case, the lion's share of that conversation was me complimenting his team internally, because they really were so wonderful and they were really involved, and they helped us understand, what is our company culture? Why is this so important to us? And I think that in-house lawyers can really shine when they are the expert on the business objectives. So you're not just also saying, okay, well, here's what the business wants to do. Can we do it? You're saying, here are the short-term and long-term goals of the business. How do we get there? Let's partner together to figure it out. And I'll say more junior in-house lawyers that I talk to often say, well, how am I supposed to know what the business objectives are, right? How do I get a seat at the table? I'm not part of those discussions. And I think what I've seen and what I've heard as being really beneficial is relationship building. It's like anything else. You're in a relationship business too, right? And so taking proactive steps to build those relationships with your business stakeholders, whether that's the C-suite or whether that's just the business unit that you serve, invite them to a Zoom, invite them to lunch when we get out of this crazy pandemic, right? And ask them what's going on in their business. What are your short-term and long-term goals? What are your roadblocks and how can I help? And those small steps I have seen really pay dividends for in-house lawyers, because they're no longer seen internally as like a roadblock and a hurdle that the business people have to get over to accomplish their business goals, but rather a true partner.
That's a great question. So, in this show of hands, again, here's first chance for this. And this doesn't have to be you. This could be a friend of yours. How many of you work at a place where the legal department is considered a negative part of the balance sheet and not a true asset for the company? No? Okay. So I think about asked the same question.
A half hand raise. We got a half.
Okay,
hand
I think
raise.
about asked the same question 5 years ago. It may have been one of the biggest struggles. And I'm really curious about your timelines when people started moving away from being away from the business folks and being a part of the business. And that's what we're being told is the biggest change in-house in the last 3, 5, 7 years, where people are trying to show strategic value for a bunch of reasons: to get paid, to get promoted, and not just do legal work. How many of you manage outside counsel versus work just inside the department? So who works with outside counsel? Okay.
So
And
a lot
then-
of you. Okay.
Yeah, almost everybody. And on your teams, do you have people, junior to you that just do legal work and don't really work with outside counsel? Okay. Is that different than the last 5 years or 7 years? Were the people just doing NDAs and just doing contracts? So that's what we're seeing too. So when we were told, congratulations, you've made partner, go get business, hopefully we had a plan to how to do it. And now the perspective for developing your career in-house is, it's not the same. You already have your client's your company, but what are you doing to promote yourself inside the company? And it's not just be good lawyers. That's kind of how my generation was raised. I'm Gen X, I'm 51, you can't ask, but I can tell. And all we wanted to be told was that our work didn't suck, that our problems were fixable. And we were like, sweet. Now we're working with millennials and Gen Z, and their perspective is entirely different. They want to know why they're doing the projects. They want to know what's the value of this project. They want their critique being a very interesting choice of the word. Tell them all the good things they did and how they can be better at the things they do well. And they won't worry about the bad stuff. So we have generational changes, and we definitely have business changes. And it sounds like you guys, once again, are 5 or 6 years ahead of the law firms, because the kind of way we do business, or the way we used to do business, doesn't work anymore. You don't just come in and solve problems. You either integrate yourself and be part of the team, or you're a vendor and you're one and done. And nobody wants that. I had the example says, I got brought in from to do a deal last year, a fairly significant wealth management company. They had some public work and some private work. And they had a very sophisticated in-house attorney, very accomplished, and he was a compliance lawyer. And I mean that in the most flattering sense. Compliance, compliance, compliance. Their work was so involved that he had an AGC compliance. So GC compliance, AGC compliance. They got ready to sell a division for about $30 million. And the CFO said, you do it. He's like, well, that's not what I do. And like, well, why not? You're a lawyer. Why don't you just do the deal? He's like, well, first off, I work 10 to 11 hours a day. I work most weekends. I can't keep our salespeople in line from violating securities laws. I don't have time to go do a deal. So he approached me about pitching the client together so he could hire me. And it's really the first time I've worked collaboratively to help somebody and help myself at the same time. So that was a big life learning lesson for me, because this guy is as smart gets, but he doesn't do what I do. So we're doing the deals. He stayed very involved. He was a resource. His team worked on schedules. He would not leave the deal. Sometimes that was problematic, just like interacting with lawyers in general can be, but it was mostly very, very helpful. So what I did was help show his value to his team. When I got to interact with the CFO and the president, I would quantify the help he's done. I didn't just say he's smart, he's a good worker. They knew that. I said, his department just worked on the schedules. That took $50,000 off my bill. And I helped him quantify the work they were doing above and beyond their salaries for the deal. He didn't ask me to do that. He should have asked me to do that. He didn't ask me to do that. And it's my first time realizing how you can add value with your words. I mean, he did the work. I just kind of articulated it in a value matrix.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, we'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation, like leveraging your relationships with outside counsel to advance internally. And I think that's a perfect example of exactly that.
Yeah, we did. So we're at 1A and B of our first bill. We're talking about being a strategic resource. That's the being a good lawyer part. And I don't know if you guys know this or not. There's studies out there that all of us think the most important thing we can do is be smart. And nobody outside the legal profession thinks about that. They assume we're all smart. They want to know what it's going to cost, how fast is it going to get done, what are the roadblocks. Like no one really interviews a lawyer to say, are you intelligent? So be a strategic resource, and then also be proactive, not reactive.
Yeah, and was there a
No, that's
question?
it.
Oh, I was going to say on the proactive, not reactive, I think this is especially true in like compliance heavy industries. You know, the challenge I think that I hear from in-house lawyers is that you're paid to make sure that there isn't a fire, not to put it out. Like you're paid to prevent the fire from ever happening, right? And so sometimes it's hard to value that, because it's easy for me as outside counsel to come in and say, oh, I solved the problem, or, you know, we settled the case or whatever. But sometimes it's hard for you to say, do you understand what we just avoided by me taking these steps, right? And so I think one way to really advance internally is when you can lean on your outside counsel to see what are the trends, like what's coming down the pipeline. And again, this is really big in the compliance arena too. You know, what should we be worrying about? And then go to your stakeholders internally and say, here's what we're seeing. Here's what we need to be doing. Here is my plan. And if you can show that value internally for how you're going to save them all this money in the future from litigation, or, you know, save money doing it this way, or promote employee morale by doing it this way, whatever the case may be, I think you can really show value by taking those proactive steps. And again, that's where you can, you know, lean on your outside counsel and ask them. I mean, when you have some time, I know none of us have any spare time these days, but.
Well, I thought in-house folks just work 9 to 5, and you had several hours a day to do general research and keep up with topics of, that's what we're told.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And now you're all working remote, so nobody's working.
The famous, I'm trying to remember the phrase, but there's a funny phrase out there for, yeah, that's not all it's cracked up to be, or not all true. But you know, check in with your outside lawyer. So perfect example, I was having a happy hour with a friend of mine, and you know, we're having our margaritas, and she's like, tell me about that new sexual harassment law in Texas. I saw your e-alert on that. What do we need to be doing? I want to put a plan in place, you know, for our business in Texas. And so she really wanted to stay out in front of it, and she wanted to go to her boss, who was an AGC, to present the plan, right? And so that's where you can lean on your outside lawyers to say, you know, keep me up to date on what you're seeing and what the trends are. All the law firms now have these alerts.
Yeah, Elena, so we work at Nunnally. We have Ealerts. Elena, what's an e-alert?
An e-alert they're usually employment law alerts, and we craft them, but they do cross over into other practice areas. Heath would probably know a lot better than I would. But you know, they're alerts to our clients when something is groundbreaking in the law that we think that is relevant to them and that they should know about. And so, you know, your outside counsel, most firms do them.
Yeah, you can say it a couple ways. Who wants more lawyer emails about random law topics? Raise your, okay. Well, now, so the difference is, this is the half glass full, half glass empty thing. If you aren't leveraging people you like, that you trust, to point you to, you know, great legal research and analysis being done, and just getting that in your inbox, well, then you have to question if you're really making use of good resources. No one wants every email from Nunnally or Skadden or anything like that. But I can tell you right now, as an M&A guy, I go to 3 New York firms and 1 Silicon Valley firm, and I get their alerts because they've got thousands of lawyers, all brilliant, all trying to be first to market with changes in the definition of fraud. And in fact, I'd probably give a whole seminar about, should you define fraud, or should you have fraud be another, no, nobody, okay. No. Well, it's very interesting to me. And I've told the story to other M&A lawyers, and I've forwarded them the e-alert from Sherman Sterling 5 times in the last 2 weeks. So in the right audience, we need that. And I think it's very natural for all of us to say that I know what I need to do my job. And that's probably true. The question is, can you get better at your job by having people spoon feed you very specific information that will help you? And to Elena's friend's comment, not to bash her, she's not in the room, she's in the room. Okay. Yeah, I got your alert. I didn't read it, but I got your alert. Like, that's not very helpful either.
Well,
So
to her
how do you-
credit, it was sort of this is what it says. I mean, we're not going to give you like a full sexual harassment policy in the alert. It was like, this is something to be thinking about and partner with your outside resources or call us if you need help. So that was sort of the call us if you need help.
Yeah, so what's a better way from our perspective, dying to help you, dying to get your business, dying to be involved in your careers, what's a better way than just relying on Ealerts?
Well, I guess I would ask them.
Yeah. So,
I think targeting it. So I know of my clients, our firm in particular has the opportunity to opt people in and out of certain alerts. So I make sure that my clients receive really targeted information that is relevant to them in their practice area. And so your outside counsel can do the same thing for you. So if you're just getting totally over, and maybe you like getting all the alerts, which is great. And maybe you have a general practice, so you want to see everything from different practice areas. That's great for generalists, especially. But if you have a really niche area, you can make sure that your outside lawyers are only sending you things that are relevant to that practice area, so that when you do see that e-alert come in, you know you need to read it because it's something important. So I would lean on your outside lawyers to do that for you.
You mentioned earlier, I have a great friend that just went in-house after 10 or 12 years of private practice, and we're very good friends. And at the same time, I'm like, I want you to do lawyer lunches, biz D lunches with me. I want to help you keep up with things you're no longer keeping up with, because you're working, unlike most in-house lawyers, he's working 10 or 11 hours a day. And he's on call 24/7. He's not reading e-alerts and he's not getting research. So when we play golf, we're playing golf. I want a Monday lunch with him or a Monday coffee and help business development. I want to be a resource for him. And it's just different, social versus non-social.
Yeah, and check in, that's kind of how this came up with the happy hour, right? I mean, I try to check in with my clients at least quarterly, check in with them, what's going on, it gives them a chance to tell me what's happening in their business, gives them a chance to ask questions, and I get to ask questions of, what's going on with them, and they hear from me on what I'm seeing in the market. And so, again, I know hard to carve out that time. But it can be really rewarding if you sit down and just can have a lunch with your outside lawyers and see what's going on. And that gives you the information to be proactive. You don't know what you don't know.
And if you don't have the right resources to contact, then you probably have the wrong outside lawyers, because we now know more than ever how beneficial it is to help our friends, our colleagues. So it doesn't have to be lunch, it doesn't have to be cocktail hours. It could be a quasi breakfast meeting where you talk on the phone and have a cup of coffee at 8:30. People find the right resources, because we are gathering information daily, even in a firm our size, to send out to help people, bolster their legal careers.
Yeah. So I want to transition now to managing some of the common pain points between in-house lawyers and outside lawyers.
Well, first let's make sure they're a pain point. I was told at a big seminar that one of the biggest issues for in-house lawyers and outside lawyers collaborating was billing. And they tasked these lawyers, all law firm lawyers, to create a solution in 30 minutes to what they identified as the #1 pain point for in-house lawyers, billing. After 30 minutes, my breakout group of 8 came to the conclusion that we cannot help them. And this is the professor at Vanderbilt, Kat Moon, who led this session. And she says, ladies and gentlemen, you got a problem.
Yeah.
So I think without even the hands in the air, I saw a bunch of heads nodding. Is that still a problem, like communicating with billing?
Yeah.
So in my world, it's easy. I do M&A deals, and you're selling your division, your company for a bunch of money, and I'm going to charge you this much, and you're going to pay me at the very end, and we're going to do good work. Is it not that way for litigation or other matters?
It's not always that way in litigation.
Well, why don't you just tell them exactly how much it's going to cost?
Yeah,
Okay, there's a complaint about a C-suite executive creating a hostile work environment. There are 5 potential litigants. How much is it going to cost?
Right. So the actual how much is it going to cost is actually a good question to ask. It's a better question than what's your hourly rate, because what takes, you know, some other person, 50 hours to do might only take me 10 hours to do if I've done it a bunch of times, right? And so anyone who manages litigation knows that we can't always foresee what happens in a case, right? I can't control what the other side is going to do. I can't control how many witnesses they're going to subpoena. But I do think when you have experienced lawyers, they can give you a range of kind of this is what, normal, run of the mill workplace misconduct investigation should cost, normal run of the mill litigation. Now, sometimes we can't predict everything, but one of the things that I think helps is when you let the client know, hey, the other side just subpoenaed 10 witnesses. That's going to, in our budget, we thought we would only have 3 witnesses. That's going to impact it. I mean, at the end of the day, no one likes surprises in billing, right? That's the worst thing, when you're surprised by a bill. And I think at the end of the day, your outside lawyers want you to see the value of the legal services you're getting for what you're paying. So if you don't think you're getting that value, tell them. I mean, tell them up front. And if you're seeing
or don't hire them.
Yeah, or don't hire them. And if the same goes with like violations of your company's billing guidelines. For those of you at big companies that have billing guidelines, it's a waste of your time or your paralegal's time to go through and write off bills every month. So if you're seeing the same billing guideline violations, tell your outside lawyers. I mean, that's where it comes down. I mean, go back to collaboration, right? That's the theme of the presentation. It should be a true partnership where you can go to your outside lawyer and say, what's going on here? And conversely, your outside lawyer should kind of check in with you and make sure that everything's going okay, or tell you if there was something that was unforeseen.
But Elena, this month was very expensive. I don't want to tell the client that we went way over budget this month. We had a bunch of work to do, and it just is really yucky, and was hoping it gets better later.
Yeah, bad news never gets better with time.
So we were
Been
talking
my
about this in
experience.
our as we prepared this, and I was just kind of curious. Again, this is one of those show of hands. How many of you that manage outside counsel actually see the bills? Okay, so almost everybody. Okay, I was just curious if you were surprised twice. You hired the lawyers, they came in, and then accounting came in and said, "What's this gigantic bill?" Things like that. But it sounds like, once again, you're already ahead of the process. The bill's coming to you at least simultaneously as it's going to accounting for review. Do you still have problems with people pitching work and having concrete budgets? Are lawyers doing a better job at least coherently presenting the budget? Is it wish? Yeah, and is that so? I'm also curious about this too. Are lawyers so afraid of not getting hired? They're afraid to tell you the truth? Because aren't you all lawyers? It stuns me that you bring me a case and we have 5 potential litigants, 1 executive, hostile work environment. Okay. I don't work in this area, but I can at least see the variables here. And then they hire a gigantic California law firm. And you're like, well, that's probably going to make it more expensive. Then they hire specialist, local, well-known Dallas litigator. And you're like, okay, this is a problem. Our bill's now changed. What are we going to do? Are you going to work on some of this in-house? No, you have no litigators in-house. Okay, well, then we need to review the budget. Like, do people think to do that midstream, or are they too busy, or they're too working? Like, is that a part of the collaboration that hasn't happened yet that should, or do you see it happening now? Like, have you had this happen on big cases that spiral out of control?
It happens when there's insurance involved, because the insurance carrier is monitoring that very closely. So they come in and ask for reevaluated budgets pretty regularly. When insurance companies are not involved, I do not see it happen as often. And I do think sometimes then you get out in front of your skis a little bit, because all of a sudden you're kind of a few months in and you're like, well, this is costing more than I kind of thought it would at this point. And so I do think it's a good idea to have, just take that temperature every so often on where we are on our legal spend. I have a client, for example, and this is just on their labor and employment advice and counsel work, but they have a lot of issues across the country, and they're pretty heavily unionized. And so their advice and counsel stuff is a lot. And so she asks me to send her just a quick email every 2 weeks, kind of where are we? What's our legal spend? And I'm happy to do that for her, but it helps her keep track of that cost center. And so your outside lawyers can do that for you too, if that's important to you.
So I have another question for the group, and this one doesn't have to be answered, but hopefully somebody will. Are you still asking lawyers what their rates are, or are you asking what the spend's going to be? Has it changed from one to the other? Both? Okay. I was curious about that because I back again to the M&A world. I have 24 years of experience, and I know what deal sizes look like. So a $10 million deal averages $50,000 to $75,000, and a $100 million deal averages $250,000 to $300,000, and a $1 billion deal, you know, the percentages go down, but I have all these deals, and there's a big study out there, and it tells us. So we aren't coming into the pitch worried about somebody telling us that the facts are different. We know what the facts are, and here's what the facts are. I did a very small deal this year, and the buyer was a private equity firm that hired Morrison & Foerster. I called the client back. My bill's going to be double. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, it's going to be double. He's like, why? I'm like, I'm just telling you, it's going to be double what I predicted. We're on a diligence call for this $10 million company. They have 13 lawyers on the phone. So I have a junior associate. I'm like, quick, we'll get some more lawyers, you know, like run around. Get some more lawyers. And the client, his first transaction ever was like, now I know what you're talking about. Oh my God. Like, why do they need 13 lawyers on this 2-hour phone call? I'm like, well, because their profits per partner graded it better than Bell Nunnally's profits per partner. And they were doing the work. You know, that's another thing too. These aren't bad lawyers not doing work. They were just doing a truckload of it when maybe they didn't need to.
Yeah, well, and that's their philosophy and that's their approach to practicing law. And so, you know, this isn't really part of our presentation, but I would encourage you to find outside counsel that aligns with sort of your philosophy and your approach to practicing law, because it varies, you know. And so, you know, find someone that's going to be a true partner for you in your approach to things. So one other common pain point that I hear about is like lead time on information gathering, document gathering. Anyone have issues with that or reviewing documents? No?
Well, it's due tomorrow, and it's 5 o'clock, and I know you're at the ACC meeting. I just need you to pull up all the financials from 2008. And,
Right.
and if you can you bait stamp? Is that what they call it, bait stamp?
Yes.
Yeah,
they
can you
call it
please bait stamp and send it over
Right.
by 7:30?
Yeah.
That's not how it works?
No, yeah. Well, sometimes that works that way. I don't think our friends in-house appreciate that very much. Well, if it's not a big deal to you guys, I guess we have folks on the phone that we can't hear from, but I do think that is a pretty common complaint, you know, hey, lead time on things, you know, it's not so easy for me to, there are some things I can just go in and a few clicks, I can pull a report for you, but there are other things where I have to go to multiple different stakeholders and chase them down for weeks to try to pull the information together. You know, if it's a litigated matter and it's a discovery request, you know, you all probably know we have 30 days to respond. So by the time we get the requests, we read them, we figure out what we're going to object to, we see what we have and what we need, you know, that cuts into the 30-day deadline. Then we send you a list of information that we need. And so, you know, usually at best, you're looking at kind of a 20-day window or so, and less than that, because we've got to have the documents back to review. We've got to Bates label it and all of that, redact it if we need to. So, you know, I think it's a good idea to, you know, communicate with your outside lawyers in terms of what lead time looks like for your organization, and just let them know so that they can plan accordingly. I represent a lot of really large retailers. I now know from representing retailers that I cannot plan a deposition or an arbitration or a trial between November and January. I can't. It's their peak. They will not let me talk to their people between November and January, right? So, you know, but those are things that I learned from my clients over the years. So now I just know not to plan it. So, you know, just communicate, collaborate with them so they understand those internal constraints that you have on information gathering.
I'm also curious in that arena, has that changed where is this an obvious comment from Elena that lawyers are already working with you to understand your schedules and work together? Do you feel like you're a part of that collaboration, or do you feel like you work for your lawyers? Okay. But that's good. That's good.
We're doing something
You
right.
did something right, yeah. Because I feel like that's what it used to be, here we are, we're save the day, give us the file, we'll tell you when it's over,
Yeah,
and that's not the way it is.
yeah. And sometimes there are deadlines that can't be prevented and there are emergencies that come up, but by and large, we have a little bit of lead time. So one of the other things that we talked about was, and this was something you had raised, Jeff, so I kind of want you to touch on it, but the concept of right sourcing. I've always sort of thought about that and talked with my mentor internally about sort of the highest and best use of our time, but you called it right sourcing, which I think makes sense.
Right sourcing
too.
comes from the Vanderbilt Poly Institute, because we're being told that that's what good legal ops departments are trying to help their lawyers understand, that it doesn't matter if you like doing leases, you're a 20-year attorney, the leases are your form, this should be pushed down or pushed out or done away with. And I see some nodding heads again, so I feel like I'm learning something, but the right people, the right way, the right result, and the right work. And as lawyers, I don't understand the concept of not doing work or turning work away. But the reality is we should in some instances. And I had a client that worked a lot with a very large airplane manufacturer. And they decided they don't negotiate NDAs anymore. Here's their NDA, sign it. They're just done. And it wasn't obnoxious. The tail was a little long. It was like 5 years or something. They're like, well, that's what it takes to do business with us, because no one here is going to do that. And then I also learned something about how the legal department pushed work back internally to the business people. Stop jacking with my forms. This is what our sales contract looks like. You want to sell $10,000 of widgets. That's great. You change something, it's going to cost us $3,000 internally to evaluate that. We're most likely going to tell you no. And you're going to go back to the purchaser, they're going to say fine. So pushing back work on in your instance, your company, but in other instances, the client, so that the work's not done. And then we're also dealing with this for the better and worse, artificial intelligence, law companies. They're changing how work that used to be lawyer work is no longer lawyer work. And you either accept that or you don't. And I have a couple of great examples of those two concepts, both in-house. I caught up with a very young former colleague that's working in-house real estate for a very good company, 2-person department. So he's second year, and I'm like, what do you do? And he's like, I do all our under $1 million leases. I'm like, oh, what does your department do? Oh, this, these amazing things, this development, we built this building, we built this skyscraper. I'm like, do you do that work? He's like, no, my boss does all that work. I'm like, interesting. So you do nothing fun. He does all the fun work, and you probably shouldn't be doing the work you're doing. He's like, yeah, I'm just afraid to ask him for more work. So it thought to me, that's just wrong. Like, I know he's junior and he works for a senior person, but he needs to go ask for more and better work. Or what's going to happen is I'm going to call him in a year and a half, and one of my real estate partners has a good job in-house. I'm like, well, I know a guy. He's underused, smart kid, loves his job, and he's probably still doing leases at this very well-known company. Another great example, a good friend I mentioned earlier that went in-house for the first time, replaced an absolute failure. This person had no legal training, Harvard, Cravath, and then he got hired in-house as a 10-year, and he was an absolute failure because clearly he wasn't smart. And what my friend deciphered in the interview was he was just stretched the wrong way. They were asking him to do too many things. And this was the example of he decided, I don't do deals, even though I can. I'm your 24/7 guy. I'm going to answer every day-to-day problem. I'm going to make sure our sales team is looking for deals, finding deals, but I'm not going to stop that to work on a deal for 3 months. We're going to hire outside counsel. So now he's the genius and the Harvard Cravath guy is the failure, but he made a plan for his department that this is the right work for us. And by the way, deals take more than one person. So he just hired his first AGC, and he is using that same philosophy with the AGC. I'm carving out my lowest use. Okay, that's yours. But here's the carrot. I want you to finish all those things. I want you to run with those, and then we're going to expand that universe of your work. But in his mind, the best thing to do at first was carve off all of the 4 quadrants, lowest use, lowest value, to the AGC. And I'll report back next year on how that's going. But
Well, and that goes to valuation, right? So, I mean, there is a way to value your time, like your in-house time, even though you don't bill by the
well, it's
hour.
free.
It's not
Their work
free.
is free. They have salaries.
Right. You know, your work is not free, right? And so you have to kind of come up with valuation tactics. And this is where you can also get some perspective, I think, from your outside counsel on sort of cost metrics, but like determine what work is worth it to keep in-house and what work is worth it to send out, right? So how many of you already have kind of distinct types of work that you send out? Yeah. So lots of folks. So
It's just automatic. That came
Yeah.
up, it came
It
through the
comes up,
channels and it's going out.
you send it out. But so if there are things though that are in your day-to-day that are wearing you out and are not the highest and best use of your time, like I would encourage you to kind of take a step back and figure out, is this something we should be sending out, or something a paralegal could handle this part of it, or something that I could push down to somebody else. And there's a way to value that. I mean, a really good example would be with like a workplace misconduct investigation. So let's say your company averages, 20 workplace misconduct complaints a year of the nature that they need to be investigated under the law. That takes how many hours of internal resources, whether from the human resources department or the legal department, to investigate those. What is that time and energy spent versus what is the cost of a firm to do it? And maybe you can get them to do it on a flat fee. So there's some predictability there, right? So you can establish those valuation tactics so that you're really focusing on the highest and best use of your time. And frankly, the things you enjoy, right? I mean, you should be able to do the things that you enjoy doing too.
And if my research is correct, though, you guys are already developing value matrix in your departments for your work. That's what we're being told is not necessarily cutting edge, but last 3 to 5 years where you're trying to go from line items to no. Our department did this much work, it has this much value, and we manage this other work. And you know what? We want to claim credit for that too, because our budget for outside investigations was $300,000. We did it for 200, so we win. That 100 is credited to us. Are valuation techniques already happening internally at your departments? Some yes, some no.
So yeah, Jeff was actually telling me that he had heard some in-house departments were actually starting to track their time and keep their time so that
Which
they really
sounds
could.
Awesome. Okay, well that's coming. That's coming.
Yeah, no one say it. No one say it.
It's
But yeah, percentage wise.
so that
6
sure.
minutes.
I say all the time that, if I can't figure out how to bill half an hour, I don't want to bill it, because I don't want to live in 6 minute increments for the rest of my life, which means sometimes I don't bill 6 minute matters. But part of the evolution that I'm being told in the legal departments, especially anything like 4 and up, because you want to be a part of the business. We all know that. You're already doing that. But you also want to show value and increase value. And you can't do it if you just do everything they ask you to do. You can't do it if you have no plan for the department or no parameters of what's good use of your resources and not. And that comes from either not doing it or sending it out. And once again, this is happening in your world, it's happening in my world, it's all our world. Law firms are figuring out how to be a resource for that. We're putting together teams of lawyers that can handle investigations at fixed fees and fit the budget. And more so than ever, we understand budgets and constraints. And we're willing to work and live in that. And if your partner lawyers aren't, you got the wrong lawyers, because this is coming down all across the board. AmLaw 200, startups. It's the new lawyer finance 101. Find out what the budget is, meet the budget, live with the budget. And that's internally as we run our businesses. You want to talk about lawyers relating with businesses for the first time ever? Throw a pandemic on top of us. Wonder if we're going to get any work for a year. Have meetings with the finance department to figure out, what if nobody sends us work? Do we have an insurance policy? What's our insurance policy like? And I think more than ever, law firms are aligned with law departments in a very practical way, because we lived it, trying to figure out how to feed everybody, keep everybody busy, and adapt to the changes in the law. Elaine and I had one of our first interactions together that we collaborated on. Good client, new client. I need to talk to a labor person 5 o'clock Friday.
That's when they usually come in, those phone calls.
Like, well, I'm on the golf course. I'm a corporate lawyer. We don't work on Fridays. So I'll connect you with Elena. And I don't know if you remember this, Elena. Guy doesn't want to come to work because he's afraid of COVID. Can I fire him?
Oh, yeah.
So CEO, big company. And Elena's answer was, you can fire anybody.
You can fire anybody.
There just might be consequences.
That's right.
And so we ran down the problem of what the consequences are, and he kind of calmed down a little bit. And then later, maybe the same person, we don't know, made an anonymous tip to OSHA that they had unsafe environment at their workplace. So guess what happened then? OSHA comes in, check. No, they're doing it great. They're doing more than the health regulations are right now. This is a super safe place to work.
Yeah.
CEO walks over to the guy, you're fired. Like our place is good, you're fired.
Right.
So there's always something to do, but that's kind of a little sidebar there. It's just kind of funny.
Yeah, COVID. What
COVID.
interesting times for a labor and employment lawyer.
That'd be a good show of hands. Did COVID change the way any of you were working last year at your law departments? Or is it just business as usual?
Couple hands.
Are any of you back in your offices?
Few hands.
Okay. You work for Toyota, right? You're never going back to your office.
That's funny.
And that's a whole nother. So that's, it's not even on our topic here, but that's a whole other aspect of collaboration. If you're not around your people, you need other people more than ever. And it's a better time. Like I remember the first couple of weeks that I worked from home when work started back up again. I was doing a private equity company was buying a plumbing company. And they're like, pencils down, pandemic. And then about a week later, like, wait, plumbing's not going away. Pencils up. We want to buy the company.
We have an ice storm
We
coming.
want to close tomorrow. Let's go. And so here we are, all at our homes. No one stepped foot in the client's office for the first time ever. The clients were actually in their offices. They were essential. But we would have these lead times of, well, when can we get the financial report? Like, well, the CFO will be in the office next week. He comes in on Tuesdays. Like, well, we're supposed to close the deal Friday. But anyway, that's sidebar. But it's back to needing people and collaborating. We're being told you're collaborating internally better than ever. You're moving out of the law departments. You're moving into the business departments. You're showing value. You're showing justification for your time. Your outside counsel is craving the ability, desire to be a part of that. And if you don't tap the resource, you're just making it worse on yourself, which lawyers can do sometimes, but it's just bad business.
Yeah. Well, and I think sometimes we all get in that habit of like, go, go, go. And we're so busy that we sometimes forget to kind of step back and take a more strategic view of the bigger picture. So, one of the things we also wanted to share is maybe our final point before we all can get to mixing and mingling and having margaritas is
We're supposed to have a margarita yet?
yeah, well, I guess we jumped the gun a little. Perspective on, how successful in-house lawyers have leveraged their relationships with their outside counsel to advance internally within companies. And I think Jeff was going to share a little bit on how he's seen people do that to advance internally at the companies that they're with, and how I've seen people do that to advance to new companies.
Yeah, so it's one of the things that you don't think about unless you live the world you live in. Back to the law firms, it's easy, to advance internally, do good work, make partner, get some business, and then you find out that it's more than that. I need to be friends with Heath because he's on the compensation committee. I need to make sure I do presentations, so I get credit for that. And oh crap, this person's on the executive committee. I don't even know this person. So how is my career going to be advanced internally at Bell Nunnally if I'm not connecting with the decision makers? And who are the decision makers? And they change at my firm. They probably change in your companies too. And part of it is, back to the stealing Heath's presentation about Ted Lasso, it helps just to be a good person, helps to be kind, helps to get to know people and be social, but you really need a plan and you really need to decide, am I trying to advance here? You may not be. You may have a great job, make a great salary, have great work, and that's it. That's fine. A lot of us want something different than the status quo or the present. So how do you move up the food chain in a law department? I'm guessing, because I never worked in one, there's still politics in legal departments. There's still politics in big business, small business, because there's people there. If there are people there, there's politics. And so I don't like to drink margaritas. They're all going to a Mexican happy hour. Hey, well, get a beer. You know, like there's some of it's obvious and some of it's not. But if you don't know what the plan is for your personal development, how are you going to get there? And I have a great friend that left Thompson and I as a 5th-year associate. So that's kind of young to leave. And that's kind of scary in the deal world because you don't have enough deals. You won't get credit. Like I can tell you about the $1 billion deals I worked on when I was an associate at Thompson and Knight. I don't get hired for that because they know I was an associate. It's not good pedigree for me. It's what have I done since I've been a partner. He went into a big energy company to be the GC's deal guy. And my concern for him was, hey, you're going to be an associate for the rest of your life. You know, the GC sees how good you are and sees a resource in that. This is a huge company. He wants to offload that part of his job. I didn't have that phrase back then, to do bigger deals. And you're going to blink and in 5 or 6 years doing the same thing, the same place, making the same money and maybe have some stock options. So he looked around the room and said, well, I want to be the GC. I'm like, well, how are you going to do that? So he starts talking to the other assistant general counsels, all of whom hate him. They didn't come up his way. That's not how they worked at this company. They were all hired out of law school. They were all hired to be nothing but in-house lawyers, energy lawyers. They rotated around the world to learn the business. They did not like my friend. They did not like his position, and they probably hated his compensation. He's like, well, this is probably not a good place for me to market internally. And then he found out, so he connected with some business folks, lunches, drinks, golf, and he found out that that company had a management training program that essentially they were so big that anyone with a couple years of time served could be considered for the management development program at this company. Because this company's philosophy was talent can come from anywhere. It doesn't necessarily come from Wharton, MBA schools, it can come from anywhere. And they wanted these resources internally tapped. So he applied for the program and he left the legal department. He's now treasurer of this company. He doesn't practice law anymore, but I'm amazed at his adaptability to find out that to develop his career, he either had to change companies or do this plan because he had no way to become general counsel of that company, period. And from the very first day he got there. And I was stunned that that kind of politics could exist in a company, that someone would have their career tapped the minute they walked in, which otherwise looked like an amazing job because for us, it looked like an amazing job.
Yeah. You know, that's a great point. And I have a friend sort of going through a similar thing where she was tasked with being kind of the GC of a really small subsidiary, but she's a labor and employment lawyer and she wants to be a labor and employment lawyer. And when she went to her boss and said, you know, I really just want to be a labor and employment lawyer, he said, well, this is really a stretch opportunity for you. Like, look at the org chart, like in a very nice way. There's not a place for you to advance in the legal department. So if you want to advance at the company, and I think you should because you're a rising star, the way to do it is on the business side, right? And so he saw moving her to the GC position of this small subsidiary as a really stretch opportunity for her to learn the business and then eventually move her way into the business side and hopefully into the C-suite someday, right? And so that, you know, one of the, I guess the points there is find a mentor, and maybe that's internally or externally. And it doesn't matter if you've got 5 years of experience or 35 years of experience. There's always someone internally to talk to kind of, you know, and maybe that's your supervisor, maybe it's not. And maybe it's your outside lawyer. You know, maybe it's Jeff who's talking with the CFO or the GC every day and can be a cheerleader for you. Hey, have you thought about considering Keith for this role? He's telling me he really loves doing X, Y, and Z. Like, lean on your outside counsel to be a cheerleader for you because sometimes they have a seat at the table and you don't.
Or a different seat at a different table.
Exactly.
That was going to be my last point about internal development, that we're terrible as a group of people at championing ourselves. And it's kind of ironic because most non-lawyers think we're arrogant, full of ourselves, and we might be. I think it's another way. I think we're very opinionated, we're very defensive, but we really don't self-promote unless we're like great plaintiff lawyers. So it's kind of against our grain to self-promote. And certainly inside a legal department, maybe even super difficult to self-promote because you don't want to stand up or look like you're trying to be above the crowd that you're working with. We have the opportunity to help you because we may be talking to other people that you're not around. And we also have a lot of borderline internal external deals, which is kind of like my last point. I had such a good experience with my in-house counsel on the compliance lawyer deal, that I got our firm to nominate him for small department general counsel of the year. He didn't get it, but I made the CFO give a report, which he gladly did. I asked for a quote from the CEO, which he gratefully did. And all of a sudden, the general counsel had his whole firm considering him as being one of the best general counsels of a small department in this town. And even though he didn't win, I always say he did win, and he never would have thought to do it himself. I did it because I had such a good experience. I didn't do it to get more work. I felt like the quality of my work was good enough to get more work from them. I just thought it was the right thing to do. For my friends, I would do that all the time. I would be looking for opportunities. And when I was a baby associate at Thompson & Knight, where I started, one of the very distinguished senior partners who would later become managing partner said, look, the goal to being a good corporate lawyer is only work for your friends, but have a lot of them that work in big companies and have great work, and they're not rate sensitive. You know, that was his charge to us. And it's funny, but it's true. And somewhere out there, each of us has somebody that cares about our career outside our family. And maybe it's inside the company, maybe it's outside the company. But those people can champion you in a way that you may not be comfortable doing. And they'll do it gladly.
And that's true for external advancement too. So, you know, I was really surprised, maybe isn't the right word, but I was having lunch with a friend who's in-house, and she said, you know, there's a common misconception that once you get in-house, you don't have to do business development anymore. She said, that's not true. And we've talked a lot about that sort of internally, you know, developing those relationships with the business, but it's external too, because she was saying, you know, I don't know if my company's going to be bought and another legal department is going to come in and I won't have a job anymore. Or what if I get stagnant where I am and I want to move? So I think that successful in-house lawyers I've seen remain active and visible within the legal community. And they also kind of tell their outside lawyers kind of how they're feeling, what they're doing, because I get calls all the time from amazing companies that say, hey, we're looking to hire someone that's got, you know, XYZ or in this role, or we want this. And I think about all of my friends and clients that are in-house that might be a good fit for the role. So making sure that your outside lawyer is really a true partner and sort of knows not only the business and your business goals at your company, but your personal goals, so that we can be a champion for you, both inside your company, but in the community. So if I hear of an opportunity for you, that can be a fantastic way to really springboard your career and launch into something new, if the shoe fits, as they say. So, you know, I would definitely leverage those relationships with your outside lawyers because they can really be a cheerleader for you to advance your career.
And I can tell you, we're almost out of time. That's being strategic, that's being proactive. And all I do all year long is do deals where half the room gets terminated at the end of the deal when they go combine these companies. And you start looking at the fact that how are these two CEOs going to coexist? They're not. One's out, one's in. And it's great to be on the the sell side of a small business when everything's taken care of. But if it's obvious to you, right? And we'll end in the most patronizing of manners by saying, be working on your career, be trying to develop your business career for yourselves, and you have a ton of resources available to you, including the fine folks at Bell Nunnally, as well as your personal friends and contacts. They're dying, they're different, they're changing, and they're dying to help you out in your business development.
Yeah, 100%. So Jeff and I, go ahead. We have a question in the back.
So when I was a junior lawyer, I was always afraid that if I talked to outside counsel that was very close with the general counsel, that it would come back to my GC at the time that, hey, so-and-so star on your team or average lawyer on your team or whatever that may be is actually looking.
That's super smart. That's really smart. That was a great thought to have. And I would tell you that who did you want to talk to? Because I can promise you right now, if you talk to Peter Kozidar, who's a senior associate at my firm that works on a lot of my deals, he's not talking to the GC, but he's talking to me. And there's ways to navigate the politics, if you will, so you don't compromise yourself, so you don't put yourself in a bind. But yeah, the last thing you want to do is do great work and have your boss think you're an ingrate. So it's almost like peer-to-peer networking. The person you should have talked to back then, if you hated that firm or that job, was probably the second or third year at the firm you work for, or the lower entry-level business folks. They're going to work their way up, and maybe your launch wasn't next week. It was 6 years or 2 years later to a better position.
Well,
So-
I think that's part of the relationship building, right? Like you have a good read on what kind of relationship you have with your outside lawyer. Okay, is that person the relationship partner? Can I really trust them? Do I have a closer relationship with the third-year lawyer who's working the deal with them? It just goes back to that relationship building. But if you have a true partnership with your outside lawyers and you really are collaborating with them, that should be someone you can trust and go to and not worry about that getting back to the GC. If it's a tangential relationship and it's just strictly business, yeah, that's probably not someone you'd feel comfortable confiding in, and I get that. But I think the goal would be ultimately to have a true partner that you work with.
The other reality is your outside lawyer worked for the company, not the GC. So if you had enough time with the outside lawyer, you probably could have developed a relationship where they wouldn't feel obligated to talk to the GC, because that's not really his client. Client's the company. And we lose track of that a lot because the GC hired me, but I don't work for the GC. I work for the company and the people.
And if they really like you and you go to a new company and you're going to hire him, that's more business for Jeff. Because so, I mean, the long-term play from an in-house lawyer is, there.
We're done. Our hour's up, and I'm told you're supposed to stop exactly at an hour at the ACC meetings. But everybody that's not trying to expand their web, isn't really thinking proactively. And if I get the call next week from a second-year associate at a big firm, I'm going to try to help the person, because I know that, first off, I don't care if it ever helps me. It's the right thing to do. It's paying it forward in a hard market of lawyers that's not necessarily always a great place to work. So me, Jeff Cash, just wants to be nice and help somebody if I can. I'm also going to be very mindful that you don't know where it'll come back around. So just do the right thing at all times.
Karma.
Karma. We'll end on that.